Welcome back to Morning Joe. Joining us now is Bill Browder. He's the man who inspired the Magnitsky Act, a bill that singled out a number of Putin allies and denied them U.S. visas. Because of that, Browder has been called Putin enemy number one. Jeremy Bash is back with us as well. He's former chief of staff at the CIA and Department of Defense. Bill, good morning. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
But just for our viewers, I want to back up a little bit and explain that you were the largest foreign investor in Russia for a time, right? Or one of them, anyway. Yep. Your attorney, Sergei Magnitsky, exposed some tax fraud that was happening in Russia. He was jailed and, in fact, killed in jail. And you continue to fight the Putin regime every day. Why do you fight so hard against Russia and against Putin?
So my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was killed, I should say tortured to death in a Russian prison in 2009 for uncovering a massive Putin-Russian government corruption scheme. And they killed him effectively as my proxy. They killed him because he worked for me. And that's a big responsibility. He was 37 years old. He left a wife and 2 children after being tortured to death. And so on the day when I learned of his murder, which is the day after they killed him, I made a vow to his memory, to his family, and to myself that I was going to go after the people who killed him and make sure they face justice. That was 8 years ago. And I spent the last 8 years doing that, which has resulted in U.S. legislation named after Sergei Magnitsky, which imposes visa sanctions and asset freezes. And the asset freezes is the key part of this whole story, so that against people of the Putin regime who are involved in this and who do other terrible things in Russia. And Putin went crazy.
Just to give you the scale so people understand, you were going to sign a dollar amount to the effect to Putin's oligarchs, the money that is his in one form or another that he controls. Are we talking the hundreds of billions of dollars here?
So I believe that Putin is the richest man in the world. I believe that he personally is worth $200 billion. And I believe the people around him, let's say the top 1,000 officials in Russia, are worth $1 trillion. There's so much money at stake here. This is such an important issue. And I should point out that this money is not kept in Russia. As easily as they stole it from the Russian state or as they stole it from other people, it could be stolen from them. And so they keep it in the West. They keep it in the United States. They keep it in London. That's why they're so upset.
To draw a line back to Trump, where he was so anxious to get rid of to lift this act, to get rid of these sanctions. Draw the line back to Trump. What would be his incentive? Well, he's so anxious to do that.
We don't know what Trump's position is on these sanctions. We know what Putin's position is. Putin's position is that he wants these sanctions lifted as his #1 foreign policy priority. He's so upset with these sanctions. And we know that he took this, he got this agent, Natalia Veselnitskaya, this famous Russian lawyer. He got her to go to Trump Tower when Trump had just been nominated to go and request for Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner to repeal the Magnitsky Act if Donald Trump was elected. What we don't know from that meeting is what Trump's reaction was, or I should say the Trump camp's reaction was to that. And so we're sort of sitting here, and it's a very important month because this is the month that more names get added to the Magnitsky list. And so Trump will either do that as it's scheduled in the law, or he won't do that. And this is a very significant moment.
You mentioned Natalia Veselnitskaya, the woman whose name we've all become familiar with because she was in that June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower. You've known her for some time. Is there any chance that she was not acting on behalf of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government? In other words, could she have been freelancing in some way?
There is no chance. And we have multiple pieces of evidence supporting the fact that she was acting as an agent for Vladimir Putin. Most importantly, we have the evidence that she was working closely with Yuri Chaika, who's the general prosecutor of Russia, the equivalent of the attorney general, who is Putin's main enforcer, and many other things as well. So she was an agent for Vladimir Putin showing up in Trump Tower. That's for sure. And what she was asking for is also for sure, which is a repeal of the Magnitsky Act. What we do not know is the reaction to her request.
Bill, Jeremy Bash has a question for you. Jeremy?
Bill, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Have you been interviewed by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and/or the intelligence committees investigating the money trail between Vladimir Putin and the Trump Organization?
I can only talk about what I've done publicly. I've been interviewed by the Senate Judiciary Committee about these issues, but I cannot talk about any law enforcement interactions I've had.
Fair enough. We'll respect that. But just talk about the money trail for a moment. Do you believe, you referenced Vladimir Putin's personal wealth and the oligarchical wealth around him, do you believe that some of that money that was leaving Russia in the 80s and the 90s actually went to Trump? Did Trump and the Trump Organization use Russian money either through offshore accounts or shell companies to fund Trump business projects?
Well, I'm not an expert on Trump finances or Russians' connections to Trump finances, but what we do know, and I think we've all read it in the paper, is that many Russians bought condominiums in various different Trump projects in Florida and elsewhere. Now, that may not be too different from other developers, but we know that for sure. But what we know from reading the papers, we're effectively armchair investigators. Robert Mueller and his team, which are some of the best law enforcement and investigating people in the country, have 1,000 times more information than we do. They have wiretaps, they have subpoena powers, they're able to interview people, get people to become witnesses, and we'll find out in due course if there is anything there, and if there is something there, what it is.
And just finally, Bill, can you just quickly explain the connection between the Magnitsky Act, which was, of course, named after your lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, and Russian interference in the election? What were they trying to do in interfering from your perspective?
Well, so the way I put the pieces of the puzzle together is that Putin has stated that the Magnitsky Act is something that he particularly doesn't like. It upsets him personally. He wants to get it repealed. He sent in these people to meet with the Trump camp to try to repeal it. And for some reason or another, Putin, and maybe that's the reason, Putin decided that Trump was his favored candidate in the U.S. elections. And we know for sure as well that Putin went in with various types of techniques to hack, to influence the outcome of the elections, et cetera. What we do not know for sure is whether Trump participated with him or whether Putin was just expressing his interest from the sidelines.
The assets, Bill, in London, Paris, Dublin, New York, Chicago, how do they hide them? How do they wash them?
Excellent question. So Putin doesn't keep any money in his own name. He keeps all money in the name of oligarchs, oligarch trustees. And so when you see a spectacularly rich Russian and you see their name on the Forbes list, you should multiply that by 0.5 or 50%, because the other half of that money is Putin's. And so they keep their money, or he keeps his money, through oligarchs in hedge funds, in private equity funds, in stocks, in trophy properties, et cetera, in the United States and all these other places you just named.
And given the scope and the reach of Vladimir Putin in the West and in the world, do you fear for your own personal safety?
Well, the two questions. Am I living in fear? The answer is no. I'm out there campaigning every day to hold Putin to account. Am I at risk of being killed? The answer is yes, a high risk of being killed. They've threatened to kill me. They've threatened to kidnap me. They've tried going to Interpol 5 times to have me arrested. They've tried to extradite me.
When you say they threatened to kill you, what form does that take when you say they threatened to kill you?
For example, Dmitry Medvedev, who is the Prime Minister of Russia, he was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he was asked by a group of journalists, what do you think about Magnitsky? And he said, it's a shame Sergei Magnitsky is dead and Bill Browder is still alive and running around.
Well, let me ask you a final question. As you think about the whole Trump, Magnitsky Act, Russia, Putin story, this is an opinion I'm asking for, do you get a sense President Trump, then candidate Trump, was an unwitting mark, or someone who was a witting mark, somebody who didn't understand quite what was going on, or somebody who very much got it?
You know, it's impossible for me to put myself in the mind of Trump or the people close to him. I'm just sort of slowly looking at the pieces of the puzzle that are being put together. I know for sure what the Russians wanted, and I do not know how the Trump camp reacted to that, but we will know, and we'll know quite soon, I think.
Bill, it's great to have you here. Obviously, you have great courage. Over a decade now, you've been out in public speaking about this, as you say, at great risk to your own safety. So thank you for being here. Bill also has a book called Red Notice, if you want to see how all these pieces of the puzzle come together. We appreciate you being here.
Great.
Thank you very much. Coming up next on Morning Joe, a new poll finds most Americans say Donald Trump has done something illegal or at least unethical when it comes to Russia. We'll dig into those numbers when we come right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.